We'd like to welcome everybody to the regular recess meeting of Tuesday, June the 20th, the 5:30 board meeting. The agenda tonight looks long, but I don't think it's really as long as it might appear. First thing we need, if you look, there are some indications of things that have been changed or deleted from the agenda. I think the only thing I saw deleted was in Parks and Recreation, that they are presentations that might be seen now. Do I have an approval of the official agenda for this evening?
Mayor, so moved.
We have a motion to approve the official agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The first thing is, and he's not here, he took his plaque and he left this afternoon. I was going to give and present to Bill Webb a plaque for his many years of service that he has given the city of Starkville. We'll really miss Bill. He had his shorts on and he was in a good mood, and I think he plans on leaving for Alaska in the morning. He's not taking his wife either. He's meeting friends. Well, I think she was invited. But we really will miss Bill. He'll be back in about a month's time, in which we will be engaging him to continue to help us. Our next item is public hearing. I don't believe we have any public hearing this evening. The next item on our agenda is citizen comments. Citizens who would like to make comments, come forward, please.
Good evening to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen.
How you doing tonight, Adam?
It'll be 1 year next month that we've been public service for the people of Starkville. The people would like to move forward. A lot of dragging feet and all that, it hurts. And so we would like to let them see something done, some of the campaign promises met before our four years is up. It's a very dangerous pothole on Lafayette Street, and it needs tending to, because we definitely wouldn't want no one to lose control of that vehicle and wind up at Route 2.
Where is it on Lafayette Street?
And it's after you cross the railroad track, and the hole is, it's all like Center Road after you pass it, railroad track. It needs patching because when it rains, it gets really slick. And we would like for you to look at the railroad situation as well. Over the hill and under the hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time like to come forward and speak?
Yes, I would, please.
Sure, come ahead.
Board, Mayor, this will be very brief. I am Harry Cole. This is the third or possibly fourth meeting in the past 4 months that has begun without a pledge of allegiance to the flag or the moment of silence. Many members of this community have served and are serving our country in defense of that flag. I feel out of respect to them that we should not have this oversight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, it brings us down to mayor's business. I have no immediate business this evening. This brings us down to the board business and authorization to engage the MSU Archaeological Department for the use of the gramometer and specifying areas of the Oddfellows Cemetery located on Martin Luther King Drive. Did you want to combine that with the other?
Yeah.
We would like to say take item G under this board business and combine that with Item A, which has to do with the update on where we are with the cemetery. Yeah, we're ready.
Mr. Mayor, Board, I had added this particular item to the agenda since we had not heard a report of anything that had been done relative to the situation in Oddfellow Cemetery on Highway 182. You found on the table tonight a supplement to agenda item, which is a letter to Chief Administrative Officer Spruill relative to at least an initial survey of the cemetery site done by 2 members of the Mississippi State University Extension Service, the Octavio County office here, and then an individual specializing in turf. They made some very specific recommendations in that letter, which I think is certainly a good start to the improvements that we hope to make in that particular area. Ms. Selfie, if you will carefully read that when you get a chance, and let me know if there are any points of that concern you in terms of some of the things they're recommending, and then maybe later on tonight we can take any specific action if required relative to this.
I sure will, thank you.
Okay, and also as part of the whole point on the agenda was consideration of the use of the gradiometer to do some location of things in the cemetery. Ms. Spruill, why don't you report on that and tell us what's going on here?
Yes, sir, I'll do that. The gradiometer, if you'll recall, was used in the University of Oddfellow Cemetery, and when Ms. McCarthy brought that before us. And when I met with the archaeology department a couple of months ago, and he indicated to me that the use of the gradiometer would be a good start. However, he did indicate that there were certain areas of the cemetery that were going to be somewhat difficult because of the terrain and because of the way it was laid out, but that he thought there were some very specific areas and confined areas that he could use the gradiometer in and get us the results that would then allow us to move ahead with changing the topography to make it a little easier to put a road in, have access to, and keep up with mowing and whatever requirements may be necessary. So as it stands right now, I think the next step would be the use of the gradiometer. I don't foresee, I could get an estimate from them, but they weren't quite sure. They weren't able to give me a good idea of what it would take because they were going to look at very specific, if we engaged, and they were going to look at some very confined and specific areas to be able to make that determination. So I don't have a good estimate right now as to what that would cost. We could do a not to exceed, but as I mentioned in the agenda item there, I talked with Mr. Young, and he said that there's some funds that would be accessible to us for that purpose because of the nature of the area. There were some funds that were available to achieve that. So if the board would like to set a not to exceed amount, or if you'd like me to come back once I get a firmer estimate on what it would cost, but I believe that, based on the letter that we received today, which is why you just got it at your table now, based on that letter, I think everyone concurs that that is the next step. It's just a matter of what we're going to have to do, how much it'll take to get there, to get the information we need.
On the gradiometer matter, I am told that this, of course, is no magic answer to problems of location of plots and graves and so forth. It helps guide the way here, so we should not be expecting something that it cannot deliver from this, but certainly should help the situation in determining location of burial sites and so forth. And as you see in the letter, the first part of the letter talks about the conditions they found as they surveyed it. Then they made some immediate recommendations that have to do with some fill dirt, some leveling out as much as is possible some of the terrain in the area, and also as much as possible using the plat that we have, plus the gradiometer, plus people's knowledge of the cemetery to determine where graves are located. Of course, this brings up the immediate question in this fill dirt, which is, as you think about the cemetery site, very limited amounts, if any, equipment are going to be able to get over there, except on the hill areas, perhaps, of course, some safety concerns there. So we're talking perhaps a lot of handwork and a lot of the old wheelbarrow shovel type of work and all this type of thing. My question, of course, was, do we plan to utilize city forces in whatever department is appropriate for this, or do we plan to try to contract some of this out? And if there are any thoughts on this, we can move toward doing that. I'd like to try to do some, if possible, with city workers to see how that goes. If that is not possible, then we need to come up with a plan for contracting some of that work out.
Well, we can certainly attempt to get a bid out, and I think during the summer months, we're probably going to be pretty well engaged, but maybe that in the fall, we might have some time that might be a little easier. And I believe the letter indicated that this time frame would be better to start doing some of the repair work in the fall than we did right now. So.
Don't we have a person on our payroll that is a landscape expert that we've hired for landscape purposes? And that,
well, Glenn Beverly does.
Yes. And so did we not just receive this letter today, perhaps?
I just got it today.
And so would it not be prudent on our part to say, review some of the suggestions that are made here and then bring him on board to take a look at this?
Well, we certainly can, but in terms of determining gravesite locations, I mean, that's something that's going to require.
Well, it's going to take a combination of several things.
Certainly. Whatever the board's pleasure in the next step. The gradiometer just seemed to me, at least offers an opportunity to see where we may be able to make some modifications in the terrain to make it easier to service the entire area.
How about if we proceed with some of the gradiometer work to see how that goes, whether we think it's beneficial and so forth, while at the same time we talk with the landscape department to take a look at their schedule for the summer, what they might or might not be able to do, and at the next meeting make the decision and proceed ahead with city forces or some type of contracting out if the discussion with the landscape department says, oh goodness, we're so loaded we can't do any of this type of stuff. Then prior to the next meeting we ought to have appropriate city people go on and draft a proposal to put out for quotes on that, so we won't lose yet another 2 weeks. Remember, the recommendation is to try to do something with the terrain, fill dirt, so forth, leading to the fall with the preliminary coverage of ryegrass, leading to establishment of a permanent turf in the spring, as I quickly read the recommendations here. Ms. Self, any initial thoughts on that, or does that sound like a good approach, or how would you alter it?
That sounds like a good approach. But in the meantime, the grass will be growing, so what are we going to do about that?
On that, Chief Lindley, did I?
Well, I believe that was a one-time.
So we may be able to get some workers to, again, do that, and that's certainly something we ought to do at every available opportunity.
Of course, I would not want to carry that all summer, but we certainly can do it another couple of times this thing.
Especially prior to the gradiometer work, if necessary, and so forth. Those graphs should not impede that, but it impedes what you're looking at. Okay, please proceed with that if you will. And so we'll schedule this for the next agenda
board
item.
meeting, we'll have this as a report on the direction.
Gradiometer with the not to exceed amount? Do you want me to?
I think we should. Do you not, Ms. Self?
Definitely.
Well, then I would move that we proceed with the use of the gradiometer and the expert from the Department of Archaeology at the university in an initial amount, and we can change it, not to exceed $5,000.
Second.
We have a motion. All of you have heard the motion. We have a second to the motion.
Ms. Self, second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Brings us up to consideration for the request for tax abatement by Weavex in accordance with Mississippi Code 27-31-101, David. And 27-31-105.
Mr. Mayor and board members, Mr. Fagan and Ms. Tindall, we're here again, the mayor just read, and asking for some help with this expansion. WEVEX has continued to grow and have plans to grow even further, but this is just for a portion of that multi-phase expansion that's been underway for quite a few years now. And Mr. Doug Horenberg is the plant manager of WEVEX, recently moved back to the area, and he can give you the details for the recap.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Board of Aldermen. We appreciate your consideration and we appreciate your support that you've given us over the years. Anybody that's driven down Highway 12 notices that we continue to expand. We've recently added $11 million, which is the project we're asking for tax abatement on. Since then, we've added an additional $6 million in an expansion that we're presently in process of. And prior to that, in the 3 years prior to that, we did a $16 million expansion. We added 73 new employees during this expansion phase that we're talking about today. All of that helps the community, as we now have employment at WEVEX of 270 people. So, with everything that's going on positively, we would appreciate your support in moving forward to this next step.
At the last meeting, you will recall that I asked the city attorney if he had a chance to review the request for a tax exemption. He said he had not. Mr. Favor, since that, you have reviewed that for compliance from the city's point of view with state law, have you not?
I have. I reviewed it right after the last meeting. I haven't seen it since then, but upon my review, it appears to be in compliance with state law. I was assured that the application was filed in a timely manner. Of course, it has to be filed by June 1st, and so therefore that was the only impediment that I saw. The other thing was that I haven't seen a resolution proposed. As you know, the state law for an exemption requires that the true value of the items that are sought to be exempted be included in the resolution. So that's the only other requirement that is necessary.
And that's, of course, what we had the last time, if you will recall, presented was the resolution requesting.
Well, that wasn't in the packet again.
It was not repeated again,
Right.
yes. Of course, making reference to that resolution as it existed at that particular time. WEVEX, of course, has been a very good corporate citizen for the community, a very good business corporation that has made significant strides in employment, in improving the quality of life for a number of people. As he mentioned, the final current number of employees is, you say, 270 or so, and so it is my pleasure to move that the city approve the resolution requesting a tax exception for the specified property, and I'm referring to the resolution before us at the last meeting, that particular resolution. Approve that resolution granting the ad valorem tax exemption, of course, keep in mind, except for school ad valorem taxes as the law provides.
I would just ask as a part of your motion that you direct some staff member to ensure with compliance with state law that it's forwarded to the state tax commission within 30 days as required by state law.
Okay, normally the city clerk takes care of those things, and so I would specify the city clerk, Marquita Outlaw, be directed to make sure that the request gets to the proper office of the state tax commission in a timely manner.
We've all heard the motion. We have a second to the motion.
I'm second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
One opposition. Okay, it passes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Consideration of the City of Starkville debris burning policy. Chief, are you here?
Yes, sir.
You want to discuss this issue?
It was put back on the agenda as requested. We discussed it last board meeting and it was tabled until this week.
Let's review what we discussed, if you will, at the last board meeting. By the way, we have our ladies here again from down South Montgomery that experienced the difficulty with the unpermitted burning that took place in Huntington Park. They, of course, can refresh your memories relative to that particular situation if necessary. What, of course, we have in this case was an unauthorized burn that contributes some significant discomfort in a variety of different ways with smoke, ash, breathing difficulties for certain seniors, as Ms. Hunt outlined very specifically at the last meeting. We're here to talk about whether or not any modification needs to be made in the city's burn permit process, or indeed whether or not the city should continue to allow burning as opposed to the hauling off of debris from construction. So Chief, you might review the city's present process, and we could proceed from there.
The present process, in your packet, you've got a copy of the commercial burn permit and the residential burn permit, and a copy of the minutes when the mayor and board authorized this to go into effect. And basically, commercial burn permits are used and fans are used to make sure the fire burns very rapidly, and we limit 2 piles per day, and we don't limit any fires starting after 12 o'clock. And in residential, it's help basically just the leaves and limbs and that sort of thing. And we go out and make sure that they have what they need, and then we issue the permit according to wind. And we use the forestry. When they say don't burn, we don't allow burning. So basically, that's basically it. And then also in your packet, you know, we did an 18-city kind of a survey of how people do burn permits, and they're laid out there in front of you.
And I believe the reason that the complaint was that people did not follow proper procedure in regard to the burn. Is that correct?
That's right. And as soon as we got the complaint, we immediately addressed it, found out that he did not have a permit, had him to put it out. And I think it was the next couple of days, a subcontractor got involved who was supposed to haul it off, and he hauled off some of the debris, and then he started another pile burning. So, but neither one of the original owner or the subcontractor had a permit.
And in your opinion, how is our burn policy? Has it been affected over the years?
It's been affected. I mean, obviously, it's developer friendly because the developer has to haul that debris off, and it would cost, which would be passed on to the lot owner buying the lot, and plus the landfill, having to haul it to the landfill and that sort of thing. So it is developer friendly, and it has been very adequate as far, and we do get occasional complaints, even in the residential burn permits. The neighbor will complain, we'll go to the one that has the permit, and if necessary, we'll make them put it out.
Any of the aldermen have any questions about the current burn policy that we have?
You saying that if we get a complaint about a residential burning, we just go and make them put it out?
And we do, and in that permit that they sign, it goes into effect that, you know, if it's a complaint, we address it. If it gets out and it burns somebody else's property, they're held responsible, and they know all of that, and they have to sign it before we issue a permit. And a lot of times it'll end up being, it will start off the day being great, no wind, and then the wind build up, humidity will be high, which will drop the smoke to the ground, and it will just lay in the subdivision, you know, and that's when the neighbors start complaining.
Other questions?
Let's look into the situation of just prohibiting residential burning. It's, you know, most residential rubbish or trash, anything, can be handled and carried somewhere in a pickup or something like that. I'd like to see us to look into the possibility of absolutely prohibiting residential burning. I know we're gonna get some complaints about that, but we've heard people say that burning has got involved in subcontractors that maybe not even aware of what they're supposed to do or this type of thing. And I'd like to just look into the possibility of doing away with burning in the city limits of residential.
Alderman Mills, I would agree with what you're saying, and along those lines, to give all sides the opportunity to be heard, I would move that we schedule for the next board meeting a public hearing, if you will, where those that can express themselves pro or con on the issue have the opportunity to appear, and that what we will be considering is the banning of burning within the corporate limits of the city of Starkville.
Make that as formal.
And I make that as a formal motion.
Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We will have a public hearing next board meeting on this issue.
I would say one thing, if we do away or abolish it completely, that we would take up the fact that we might give exceptions to schools, bonfires, for special permits, and especially warming fires for contractors.
Certainly.
Like what Tupelo has?
Certainly.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And let me say one other thing. Ms. Hunt supplied me with copies of pictures, which I will pass around at the break, showing some of the burning pile in Huntington Park, piles of debris in other areas of town, some of your wards that are there to be burned or hopefully hauled away, but perhaps burned. So I will pass these around at break time, and you can take a look at these.
Who said we're gonna have to burn?
Well, we will vote one day if you want to declare one.
All right, report from the budget committee.
Mr. Mayor and Board, the budget team met last week to discuss the Starkville Electric budget. Of course, as Mr. Hadaway described previously, last year it was a $28.3 million budget to operate Starkville Electric. This year it's a $35.4 million budget. That $7 million increase in the budget is due 100% to increased prices for electric power from TVA. In essence, the bulk of the budget itself is the same as it was last year and of course for years previous. But there were 4 potential amendments that we discussed and Mr. Hadaway agreed to and would ultimately be for further discussion by this board. The first one, upon the Vice Mayor's recommendation, and a good one, was to postpone the discussion and inclusion of a cost of living adjustment for the Starkville Electric employees until we were able to complete that work as part of the rest of the city of Starkville. And Mr. Hadaway thought that that could work operationally and would give us a chance to consider some of the internal and external equity issues we have and other issues. It's simply a fairness issue, and so we all agreed to that. And so while the line item itself would maintain the original funding that he had proposed, there would be no cost of living adjustments that would go into effect for the electric department until this board took specific action to do that. Second, under interest expense, or excuse me, interest income, we discussed sharing some best practices from how the city manages its investments with the electric department, and we believe we'll be able to present an amendment to this budget within the next month or so, which would be able to increase that income. Third, under capital outlays, of course we have almost $1 million in capital improvements and investments. And while the total won't change, the electric department is continuing to work internally as well with us on how some of those items would be funded. For example, some of those we might borrow the funds to purchase some of the big equipment and to do new lines, et cetera. And some of it may actually come straight out of that funds. And so while we'd be approving, if we approve this tonight, the overall close to $1 million funds, we would still be working together as a board on how we might fund those individual items. And then finally, one thing is that's not in the Starkville Electric budget at this time is any type of additional payment for the proposed new service center downtown. And so if we as a board agreed to build that and it was built within this fiscal year where bond payments would need to be made, we would then discuss that at a later date. But overall, Alderwoman Self and Alderman Mills and I as part of this meeting with the mayor and Ms. Rule and Mr. Hadaway, we do recommend approval of the Starkville electric budget, excluding salary. Yes, sir.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All of you have heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Just a second.
All right, you want to discuss it?
Yeah. I have certainly no objection to the process outlined for approval of the electric department's budget, which of course, whose fiscal year starts July 1. I would like to note in your budget copy, and you can check when you get home, with regard to account number 682, there may be the offering of a budget amendment at a later date once we see how this fits into the general city's budget. So I will vote for the electric department budget, noting that that item will be brought up again for discussion as part of the city's budget process.
You heard Mr. McLaurin's concerns. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on to the next item, while we're still somewhat on the budget committee and going back to point number one about raises and cost of living adjustments and internal and external salary equity issues that we may or may not be facing within the city. Am I to understand that we are currently in the process of doing an external salary survey for various positions within the city service currently?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not, okay. Well then, I would just like to...
Presently, all we're concerned ourselves with is the electric department. We've not discussed other departmental internal salaries.
All right, well then, you know, I think it would be a good time to throw this out as the budget committee is gearing up to the meat of their budget preparation process to discuss the fact that I think this city needs to evaluate where we are, not only in the electric department in terms of external equity, but other positions around the city where people doing jobs for the city with certain skills, knowledge, or abilities could go other governmental entities within either this county or the region and get paid more tomorrow for doing the exact same job. And while we're looking at that, we also need to look at within the city jobs between departments that are doing the same thing yet are paid at different levels, and to make sure that we do balance those. So, you know, I would like to see us, and I think this would be valuable information for the budget committee as y'all are proceeding, if we're going to do, if we as a board are going to do anything about salaries this time, to actually have some hard information so we're not just shooting in the dark. And, you know, I would like for us to engage in that and do a good apples to apples comparison of job by job, defining accurate labor markets for these jobs, and that would be my idea and thoughts as we progress in this budget committee. And if I need to make that in the form of a motion to direct appropriate city staff to proceed and get that underway, I would be happy to do so.
And did you make a motion?
I'd like to see you make.
All right, well then I move that we direct the appropriate city staff to proceed with external salary surveys for the city's positions, and also come back with a report on internal equity issues as they relate across departments and between departments on jobs of similar duty requirements.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. I think something was very explained his motion very well. We have any further discussion on it?
Just one thing, and maybe you might want to introduce the new personnel officer. I don't think it's been introduced to the public and so forth.
Mr. Breer, you're over there. Please stand up and let us give you a welcome. And excuse me for not doing that earlier.
And he'd be actively involved in this.
That's right.
Appropriate staff for the salary survey.
We have a motion, second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Brings us to consideration of using Clearwater Consultants as an ad hoc basis for engineering services due to the absence of our city engineer. I believe we kind of discussed that a little bit the last time that we talked about Mr. Webb leaving. Mr. Harding, do we have any discussion on this issue? Been contacted and is willing to give us his services at a fee, I believe.
And this, of course, would be on request.
That's correct.
And so forth. I would move that in the absence of now consulting city engineer Bill Webb, that Clearwater Consultants be employed on a request basis for any engineering work that might arise in that interim period of time, to be compensated according to the fee schedule submitted attached to the document in the packet.
We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes. Brings us down to streets and drainage improvement program. I have discussed with Mr. McLaurin about the possibility of us setting up a 3-person committee. This is really a very monumental issue that we have here, with the potential of coming to the board with a recommendation of a bonding street and drainage improvement. And that I would like to have a motion to set a committee up in which he, Mr. Cox, and the vice mayor be part of the committee, where they could report to us the recommendations from their committee, and also perhaps coming up with a creative way in which we could procure funds for a much bigger project than just taking $1.5 million out of borrowed funds to do. Could someone make us a motion? Did you want to discuss this any further?
No, other than to say, if you will recall, a couple of months ago, the city engineer, then city engineer Bill Webb, gave us a list of priority streets, or streets designated 1s and 2s for immediate work, and a map of the entire town showing where these streets were located. And you'll also recall we actually set a report and discussion on that a month later than his presentation, which never occurred, and construction season is upon us. And if we're going to make any sorts of improvements in this construction season, we need to be moving along. And so thus my reason for putting this on the agenda. By the way, I noticed with interest the agenda, the 3 items that I added had in parentheses by them McLaurin. I guess to emphasize who added them to the agenda, but I take pride in adding a discussion of the street and drainage program to the agenda, the Oddfellows Cemetery to the agenda, and a polling place location change to the agenda. So I'm pleased to be associated with, I guess, our now identification of who adds what to the agenda, and I look forward to see the next agenda.
That would be interesting, considering all the streets and the drainage additions need to be done in your ward. And I assume that that would be one of the reasons that you would see it be so vocal as such, that it would be, if you look at the largest percentage of the monies would be spent in that particular area.
And privileged to represent Ward 3 I am. I certainly want to discuss streets and drainage as they relate to that ward, and sure all my colleagues would like to do the
I
same.
believe that's one of 7 wards, is that right?
It's pretty vocal on any side.
Yeah, well.
It would do him well to listen.
Did you make a motion?
I will.
Would you?
I would move that the vice mayor, the chairman of the budget committee, and the member that participates as the vice mayor, put it on some kind of trash garbage committee or something like that, be appointed to a street and drainage improvement committee to come back to the board with recommendations relative to handling not only this year's street and drainage improvements, but future improvements.
Do you have a second of that motion?
Second.
Mr. Mayor, before discussion, could that motion reflect that the gentleman from Ward 3 serves as chairperson?
Good, if you wish for it to.
That's not important.
Okay. Do you have any problem with your second in regard to that? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Consideration for a resolution changing the location of polling places for Ward 6 and 7. This afternoon late, I got in our office from the City of Starkville Election Commission an opposition to this, the polling places that you so kindly put on the list here, in which I think this has been going on for some time. I believe many months ago, our vice mayor suggested that we might use another polling place other than the Boardtown Center, which was for 2 locations for Ward 6 and 7, which was very crowded and confused in that particular area. Mrs. Self and I met with the Board of Supervisors for her ward to be located and voting in the new county court facility, but it still left the other ward kind of open for a more adequate place to vote. And I see that we have a member of the Election Commission here tonight. Would you like to speak in regard to potential opposition to the selection of church on 389?
The only question I would have at this point is, one, we like to consult about this, and I'm wondering if the facility, or all the facilities have the appropriate wiring and all the take care of the new voting machine. First, and second, in any non-public building, who is liable for any difficulties? Is the city liable for Boardtown or for the church or for any place that's non-public?
Mr. Mayor, to clarify something that you indicated to, as I read the letter from the Election Commission, it is not an opposition to what is proposed. It is expressing their distress over not being consulted in the situation, and for that we will have to apologize. The history of this was that in the last term there was discussion of what appeared to be the lack of suitability of having both polling places at one location, Boardtown Village. An election, of course, took place and proved to be unsuitable in terms of movement of vehicles, handicapped parking, congestion, all those types of considerations. And so in the last term, it fell my assignment to proceed with this particular change in polling places. The gentle lady from Ward 7 and the vice mayor from Ward 6 were asked to survey the ward to see what locations in the ward might be suitable for a polling place in terms of convenience, access, all those things that I mentioned. They met with and viewed several possible locations, met with officials that were connected to either of those locations, and determined that they would be suitable for polling places. And so thus you will recall having authorized the firm of Butler Snow to proceed with the filing and submission to the Justice Department of a request of change in polling place in Wards 6 and 7, and I have been working with the attorneys there and thus have this resolution to offer tonight. And I will read it if you will. You have copies, please follow along. A resolution of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, directing the submission of a request to the United States Department of Justice for approval to change the location of one polling place and to create a new polling place within the city. The Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, the governing authority of the city, acting for and on behalf of the city, took up for consideration the matter of submitting a request to the United States Department of Justice for approval to change the location of 2 wards polling places within the city. After discussion of the subject, Alderman Blank offered and moved the adoption of the following resolution. A resolution of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, directing the submission of request to the United States Department of Justice for approval to change the location of one polling place and to create a new polling place within the city. Whereas Wards 6 and 7 in the city have a single identical polling place located at Boardtown Village, 905 North Montgomery Street, Starkville, Mississippi 39759. And whereas the combination single polling place for 2 wards of the city has created problems with parking, traffic space, and disability access for voters and election officials at this location. And whereas the city has determined it can alleviate these problems by separating the polling places for Wards 6 and 7 and by designating each of the wards a separate polling place with adequate space for voting and parking and improved disability access. And whereas the Fellowship Hall at Mount Pelia Missionary Baptist Church, located at 840 North Jackson Street in Starkville, Mississippi 39759, provides such space and accessibility and is located within the boundaries of Ward 6 and should be designated as Ward 6's new polling place. And whereas the lobby of the Ottibbeha County Circuit Court Annex Building, located at 108 West Main Street in Starkville, Mississippi 39759, also provides the needed space and accessibility for voters and election officials in Ward 7 and is located within the boundaries of Ward 7 and should be designated as Ward 7's new polling place. And whereas pursuant to Mississippi Code annotated section 2315-557, 1972, the governing authority is authorized to fix and alter polling places within the city of Starkville. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, acting for and on behalf of the city as follows. Section 1. The governing authority finds that the present single polling place for Wards 6 and 7 of the city, located at Boardtown Village, 905 North Montgomery Street, Starkville, Mississippi, is no longer adequate in terms of space for voting or parking, and its accessibility to the disabled is compromised as a result. Section 2. The governing authority further determines that the designation of new and separate polling places for Wards 6 and 7 is necessary to alleviate space, parking, and accessibility problems. Section 3. The governing authority finds that the Fellowship Hall of Mount Pelia, that is misspelled, the Pelia there, should be P-E-I-L-E-R, Missionary Baptist Church at 840 North Jackson Street in Starkville, Mississippi, has adequate space for voting and parking and is disability accessible and should be designated as a new polling place for the city's Ward 6 voters. Section 4, the governing authority finds that the lobby of the Ottibbeha County Circuit Court Annex Building at 108 West Main Street in Starkville, Mississippi, has adequate space for voting and parking and is disability accessible and should be designated as the new polling place for the city's Ward 7 voters. Section 5, the governing authority finds that there will be no prejudice, harm, or deterrent to any voters as a result of these proposed changes, and to the contrary, voters and election officials will be able to more easily travel to and from the newly designated polling places due to less traffic congestion and increased space for parking, have adequate space inside for voting and disabled voters' access to the polling places, and disabled voters' access to the polling places will be greater than that which exists at the single polling place for both wards at present. Section 6. The governing authority hereby authorizes and directs the city's attorney and/or his representatives, and of course Butler Snow has been designated to file the submission, to submit a request to the United States Department of Justice for approval of the above described changes and new designations of polling places for Ward 6 and 7 in the city. Section 7, all orders, resolutions, or proceedings of this governing authority in conflict with the provisions of this resolution shall be and are hereby repealed, rescinded, and set aside, but only to the extent of such conflict. And so that is the resolution which I offer in the form of a motion for your consideration tonight.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. And I think that we have it so that each alderman will be, will vote on this. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tempore.
Yes, sir.
The church meets all ADA and have a requirement
Yes, sir.
for access.
Yes, sir.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and each one will vote. Davis, you vote for. There's no opposition. Alderman, we can vote on that later. Fill in the blanks. Thank you, Roy. I know you're happy for this to be concluded.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
With something that we started looking at right after the last election. Airport, departmental business.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
How you doing?
Board. In addition to the $800,000 airport improvement grant for 2006, we applied for an additional grant from the Mississippi Department of Transportation Multimodal Fund. This was applied for back in March. And we recently received notice that we were approved for that grant in the amount of just over $220,000. The language is a little bit confusing in the grant itself as to whether this requires a match. So we have verified that there is no matching funds, there are no matching funds required, and that this is a 100% grant to be used to design and construct a fuel farm at the airport. And we recommend approval of, or that the board authorize the mayor to execute the grant agreement so that we can return it to the state DOT.
Questions?
Continued airport improvement, no matching share. Come on, people, I can make all the motions tonight.
Sounds like a great grant. I'd like to make an approval that we authorize the mayor to.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I believe that passes. Which brings us down to building codes and planning department. And I believe that's the area in which I have been the temporary department head there. You guys. Request authority to advertise for the position of full-time field code enforcement officer to replace Don Lyles. Now, I understand that he is not going to have that emergency knee operation. Is that correct?
It was a hip operation. He found out today that it was a muscle instead of joint. So he will be around, but no later than August the 31st. He will be retiring by August the 31st.
But this would give us time to advertise and to, say, interview some other issues as such.
Go ahead and advertise. We remember that he is part-time and this was a full-time.
Right.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion to approve this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Ms. Brule, the so-called in-house code compliance officer advertisement is running at present, is it not?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
The second item that we had at the P&Z meeting was a request by David McReynolds for a zoning change from a C2 to a PUD at 215 Yates Street, Kenley Street. This is his second or third time, and I think you did all the tweaking to this, that you had everyone to vote in favor of this particular PUD. Is that not correct?
It was unanimous.
That basically he went back and he went from 13,
Started with 15.
started 15, he's down to 12. He's added green space, he's added a walking trail to his proposal, and I think the planning commission finally liked what he had proposed.
I think they suggested 2 or 3 amendments, which I included with my covenants on this.
And that was a covenant, though,
Yeah,
suggested, is that not?
just no RVs, no boats, trailers, things like that.
Questions from the board members?
I'll yield the floor to the mayor pro tempore if he wants to ask a question.
No, I'm waiting on you, Alderman.
In reading through your covenants, am I to understand this is going to be a private road maintained by the residents within that neighborhood?
Yes. It does meet all fire codes.
Right. As I stated on multiple previous occasions in dealing with these sorts of things, nothing against your project, everything looks great. I would just prefer that we seem to be having a rash of private roads being developed around our town, which in my opinion will lead ultimately to problems for the city down the road. And I know y'all have the best intentions with your covenants, and I wish you all the best of luck. But that's just restating another long-held position on that issue. So
Probably the only thing that was kind of
Years from now, 15 years from now, people that live there be calling city, when you gonna come fix the holes in the road? I've seen it happen over and over and over with other private roads, so it becomes a potential problem.
The problem with that is that the engineers have gotten crazy in regard to what they require for a width of a road. How wide is your private road? I'm just curious for that.
22 feet.
22 feet. My own personal street, which is maintained by the city, is 19 feet. But yet, engineers over the years past have required for the streets to be wider and wider and wider. And we get fire trucks going down our street the wrong way, it's late at night, all kinds of interesting things on a narrow street. And it might behoove us as a city to maybe look at these street specifications as being a little bit narrower than the 30-something feet that we do require. That's just a suggestion.
We'd be happy to make it a city street if we could have an exception.
And make it, as far as the base and other issues like that, specifications, that's interesting. We have a motion on the floor with a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, show the sign of the arm. Raise your arm, please. All those opposed? Thank you. After a long situation.
Can we just have the minutes reflect the fact that this is going to be a private road? Because if we come back and look, I know when we come back in the second year and look at this, and it doesn't say in there that it's a private road, we don't have anything, we have that situation right now.
Exactly. Even if it's a concrete road,
We made a mistake on your road years ago.
I didn't ask you to go take my road over, but I see the city vehicles over there all the time. I can chase them off.
Isn't that a true request?
Our next item is request by Stateside Group LLC to establish a zone designated HUD for the northwest corner of University Drive and Mississippi Highway 12. And they're here tonight to present their case, and I think y'all worked out some issues in regards to it.
And this is simply on the rezoning matter, correct?
Yes. And site approval, am I not right, Bill?
It is, and this property is actually being zoned for the first time.
Right. More slums.
Certainly, I think the one for the mayor was important.
I don't know. I inspired those. Yes. You want to say you want to be on the top floor.
You go, hey,
Yeah, listen, half.
This is a zoning change. Zoning request.
Just a quick question while you're setting up. Are y'all wanting the zone change for the entire 12 acres or just for the?
HUD for the whole.
In the recommendation of the planning, zoning is only for approval of the zoning, is that correct?
Zoning request.
Zoning request is in there, reflected in their minutes. They did not necessarily approve the site plan at this particular point, but you'll have to, you'll be going back through that process again anyway. When you bring your site plan to the city, when all the department heads are there, and then they'll go again before the planning zoning is made. That's just the process.
Well, that's fine, we'll do whatever's necessary. I didn't understand that the other night, but I probably didn't understand a lot of things the other night.
Well, I can see how you couldn't. It's kind of puzzling to me at times sitting over there.
This is, first of all, a mixed-use development that has been about 2 years in the making. My name is Bill Smith. I represent investors in Stateside. Mike Colbert is one of those investors. I'm a native of Starkville. I have a mother and a mother-in-law that still live here. I was raised here. Been practicing law in Jackson for a little over 30 years. Between my mother-in-law, Carrie Hawkins, and my mother, Virginia Smith, I think I've got at least 2 of the churches in the community covered, if nothing else. And I tell you that because I actually plan to retire in this development if we go forward with it. And I am convinced the largest growth industry for this city is retirement, and I came to that conclusion after traveling with 2 children up and down the East Coast looking at various colleges, in particular the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Georgia, been very aggressive in trying to attract their alumni back to their campus. And so we approached Charles Lee 2 years ago about the concept of doing this. And Dr. Lee was very adamant that if we did it, he wanted it done on University Drive to help buttress what he saw as a thoroughfare running from downtown Starkville into his campus, and to buttress what has already been developed in that area, and hopefully jumpstart some other developments up and down University Drive. His vision was that University Drive could become his Toomer's Corner, his Chapel Hill, his area of restaurants and shops, and something that he could use as a calling card to recruit students to this university. So that's where this concept came, and then we started looking around at developments and absolutely loved the fact that in the Cotton District you had a mixed-use development where people could walk to retail, they could park their car, they could go buy a loaf of bread or a half-gallon of milk or walk to a restaurant and never leave their home. And as we met with different people around the state, including Leland Speed, about this development, we learned that the concept was called New Urbanism, which I'd never heard of until we got into this, but we kind of fell in love with it. So this is a mixed-use development. If you'll turn to the back of the proposal, toward the back, you will see a site plan that gives you a good description of what the acreage is. I'm particularly looking at this page. It's bounded on the south by University Drive, on the north by College View Street, Highway 12 on the west. It's immediately adjacent to the entrance to the university, and by Camp Avenue on its west, Highway 12 on its east. Camp Avenue, as you may well be aware, is a public street in Starkville for about its first 150 yards. After that, it has been abandoned by the city. We would envision developing the first part of Camp Avenue to run through the rest of this development. The front page of this development is a picture of the building we propose in what we call Phase 1. It'll be built directly on University Drive. It'll have diagonal parking on our property in front of it. I will digress a second, so we looked at both parallel and diagonal parking. We think while the bike route may have to be shifted about 100 yards further west over to the south side of that street, that the curve that is caused by Hunter Henry Center would make parallel parking kind of dangerous there. So what we're doing is offsetting some diagonal parking. Phase 1 is 36 condominium units. Before we talked about retirees and alumni, I live in a 9-story high-rise in Jackson. Very frankly, we think this is just another residential development in your city, and we hope to attract some present residents in this city into this development. The bottom floor of Phase 1 is commercial space, restaurants and whatnot. I know your meeting's long and I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to mention this. We were very fortunate in this project to retain the services of I think, one of the most talented architects that Mississippi State has ever come through its campus, a guy by the name of Michael Baranco. Michael is the lead architect on Harbor Walk, on Lost Rabbit, on Flowood Town Center, which I would say are probably three of the most pleasing developments going on in metropolitan Jackson at this time. We got some help from several sources getting Mr. Baranco, but I want to give credit to the mayor too, because he helped us get Michael involved. So we're very excited about the designs he's come up with. There's a lot of green space in this. There's a real effort in phase one to take most of the parking underneath the building to in fact make it a pedestrian-friendly area that plagiarizes, but we hope kind of supports what's going on in the Cotton District and even further down and even into downtown. Michael is convinced that there's a unique architecture in this city composed of both the downtown, Greensboro Center, some buildings on the campus, and he's tried to replicate that in the structure. It's designed to appear as if it's over 100 years old the day it opens. And we'll be glad to answer any questions you have about it.
Well, let me say that I've been following this for a while, and I'm excited because I'm the alderman that represents the ward that this development will take place in. Before I do make a motion for an approval of this zoning request, I just want to see if any of my colleagues have any questions they want to ask.
Questions from board members?
Okay. Well, I'd like to probably make a motion then that we zone the 12.76 acres between University Drive and College View to HUD. Is there any other clarification that needs to go just other than what HUD?
Yeah.
The city attorney?
No, just that I thought this was on, obviously, so did Bill Smith thought this was on for site approval, but he and I have worked out a compromise regarding the restrictive covenants and the requirements of the whole harmless agreement, which our ordinance requires us to have HUDs. But we'll supplement that at a later time and be subject to my approval.
We're asking, in that effect, Mac, I see you making a puzzle look. These are fairly complex covenants that people refer to as pots that will go on different parts of this thing. And what we're really asking is approval of the zoning request for the property subject to the submittal of covenants and indemnification provisions in a form and content approved by the city attorney.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate y'all being here tonight. Dan, looks like your site is next for a site plan review on your properties on at 572 Highway 12. I believe y'all have in your packet that what he's proposed to do is to take down, I think the back shed is nice. And that if you'll notice that he did get approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
What I'm supposed to do is bulldoze down the back shed and build a kind of a strip center similar to what's on on Stark Road that Clayton Richardson has been building. It'll be 6 units there. Fits in with the lift up that end of the town. The green span is required at, I think, 540 feet, and I'll end up with 1,486. So it meets all the specifications. I have a layout here if anybody wants to see that.
Anyone got questions?
You're going to take the bait shop out of there, aren't you?
I already got it out.
All right, good.
Moved it over to Green Oak.
I'll move approval of.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this. All those in favor say aye, please. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
request by Tabor Construction Development for a sign variance located at Loxley Way south of Montgomery Street. I think they wanted to move the sign about 4 feet 2 inches or something to that effect. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. 4'6" variance.
In which the planning and zoning gave its approval for this sign variance.
And the members of the board will, or some of the members of the board will also recall the similar variance given to the apartment complex next door, Saxon Properties, and these essentially will be about in the same location and look as good as, I'm sure the Saxon, this one would look as good as the Saxon property does look the sign. And so it's, I would be pleased to move the approval of a sign variance for Tabor Construction and Development at their property located at Loxley Way and South Montgomery.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. We have next on our list a request by Michael R. Paul and Bowden E. White for a preliminary plat approval for 103 Hartness Street. Essentially, I believe what you're going to do is take the apartments and condominiumize them. Is that not
That's
correct?
correct. They've been brought up to condominium code and we just want condo plat. It's actually preliminary final plat.
I think you have that in your packet, Board. Let's take a look at that. This is Richard's ward.
Does any of my colleagues have any questions before I make motions?
Does anyone have any objection to this?
Okay, then I'd move that we recommend approval of the request for the plat to divide existing fourplex apartment building into condos with surrounding common area.
Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, before you leave the planning department, could either you or Ms. Full give us an update on the resumes and the process for hiring a new city planner? And I know we're going to talk about it in executive session, just kind of a brief update that we've gotten resumes and we're moving forward.
Yeah, when we are.
Okay.
Sorry, but it was,
Well,
yeah. Well, we're going to discuss it today, so we got resumes in, and I have included them, and I have the others available for executive session. I did not include in that group there. We had a wide selection.
Excuse me, there are some others that have come
There
in.
were three that didn't meet the minimum qualifications that we had put in their job description. So I'll
Okay.
provide them to you so that you can look at them in an executive session. But your packet for the executive session includes the ones that did meet minimum qualifications. Am I not being clear?
Yes, you're clear.
any other questions, ma'am?
Well, I was just going to, and then when we start talking about the interview process, one of the things that we discussed when we first started was including some of the groups that are participating in these things, and it would seem to make sense that we include the Planning and Zoning Commission, perhaps the chairman or the vice, or whoever from that group on an ex officio basis.
I thought maybe it might be a situation where we may try to say reduce to 6 if we have down through our process and go get it down to the final number and then include them into the final number in regard to the process.
I thought we were going to give suggestions as to how many of the applicants we would like
Well,
to
that's
interview.
essentially what I'm saying, yeah. Okay, departmental, the city clerk. How you doing?
My first item is the claims docket. It's excuse me, my allergies are acting. The claims docket through June 15th, and I recommend that the board approve those claims shown on the claims docket.
Questions or a motion?
Ms. Howard, you need some water? You can have this, go ahead. You got it, yeah. I'm drinking Sprite tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the claim docket as of June 15, 2006.
We have a motion that we approve the claims docket. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion with a second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The next item, please.
The next item is the agreement in your package. You'll see an agreement with Bank First for credit card, accepting credit card payments. And that's their standard agreement. You'll see where they're saying about fees. The bank itself is not going to impose any fees on us, but they inform me that the credit card company passes fees through to them that they'll pass to us. And we're requesting that we pass to those wanting the convenience of using credit cards.
Ms. Howard, one thing that comes to my mind, just as a point of information, why do we end up with only just one bank? Do we allow all banks to have an opportunity to participate in this?
Well, because we have our general fund at Bank First.
But, okay, but should other banks, is it normal to give other banks the opportunity to compete for this or have an opportunity to have this type of service?
Well, yes, but from what I'm told is that these fees, there's no way to determine if it's a better deal with the bank, because the fees they come from the MasterCard, Visa card company.
Or the credit cards not directly deposited into the accounts that we have with the participating banks, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And if I understand Mr. Perkins' question here, he's wondering, we would not have other banks to say, bid for these particular services. It would be difficult for them to bid in that they would not have necessary accounts directly with them.
With our general fund.
No. Am I not correct about that?
That's correct.
Any other discussion about the credit card?
How are we handling this now?
We don't accept credit card now.
So if someone wants to use a credit card, then they would have to be willing to pay a 2.5% convenience fee, essentially. That's just charged by the card itself.
That's correct.
So, for the record, if somebody comes to pay, say, a $50 speeding ticket, the city's going to get its $50.
That's
and
correct.
then we're going to charge them an additional percentage on top of that $50 for
The
to
bank
go
fees.
right.
To cover the bank fees. That's
But
correct.
we're going to get our $50 out of that $50 ticket
That's correct.
in accordance with state law.
Yes.
Mr. Fay, have you had an opportunity to take a look at this or have any recommendations?
I think as long as I haven't looked at the application, as long as the city is not paying the fee, it's not coming out of the city's funds and it's passed through to the customer, I don't see a problem. But as long as the customer needs to be notified when they come in, we need to have a sign posted so that they understand that they're going to use a credit card. But we can't not in any way pay out any money for anybody using a credit card. That would be in violation of state law. And that's what Alderman Davis is referring to when he said violation of state law. So as long as that's understood and we have our process in place to alleviate that problem, then I don't see anything illegal with doing it.
I'd like to see us continue this, take it under advisement for a little bit more review. I have a number of questions about the fees, the process, the transfer, at what point the funds become city funds, all sorts of things, as well as some follow-up on Alderman Perkins' question about participation of other banks. Participation really has not much to do at all with where money is kept. And I would move that we take this credit card matter under advisement until the next meeting. Second.
We have a motion to take this under advisement to the next meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Some credit cards get your money that night, some take 7 days. It's kind of interesting. Thank you, ma'am.
Would it be the same for a debit card as a credit card? Is it the same fee?
Electric department. Ed, how you doing tonight? Ed has got a request approval of his fiscal year 2007 budget.
We ought to done
We
this
did
right.
that. Well, I know we did that, but I'm just looking to see what we got on the spreadsheet.
Mayor and board, I have two requests. Request number one is authorization for me to travel to Nashville on June 27 to 28 to attend a TVPA manager's meeting.
Can you make both requests, so we're not going through the same process again?
I would also request that Mr. Jason Horner be allowed to attend the TVPA Line Design and Safety School in Nashville on June 21 and 23, through 23 of this year.
I would move that Mr. Ed Hadaway and Mr. Jason Horner be granted authorization to make the TVPPA managers meeting in Nashville for Mr. Hadaway and the TVPPA school for Mr. Horner, and that any necessary advances be authorized for out-of-state travel.
Second.
Motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Parks and Recreation has been taken off the agenda there. We're down to the Police Department.
Thank you, Mayor Moore. I have two matters. One is a request for authorization to pay fees in the amount of $10 per day for a house arrest program for non-violent indigent detainees, and let me explain that. Well, if you recall, last board meeting, I had began discussing this. Currently, if someone is sentenced to serve time in jail, oftentimes that may be for a non-violent offense, and it may be contempt of court or any one of a number of other things that the person cannot pay their fine for. Matter of fact, it may be for failure to pay fines. If that person goes to jail, it does two things. Number one, it takes $25 a day for the city to house that prisoner in the county jail. And the second thing it does is it takes up a slot in the county jail. And one of our biggest problems currently that we're facing in the community is overcrowding in the county jail. So oftentimes we don't have the ability to put a prisoner that may need to be locked up for public drunkenness or violent crime or felony in our own jail, and we have to transport to another community, which of course incurs liability problems, fuel consumption. What I'm suggesting is this. Currently in the city there are two private businesses that have an alternative sentencing program available to us. And one is through court programs and the other one is through court care. Currently the state of Mississippi utilizes house arrest, where that basically is a person that is sentenced to serve a certain amount of time. However, they in fact remain at their home and are monitored there to make sure that they stay there. They can go out if they have a job, or in the case that they do not, they still are required to be there. The indigents usually do not qualify for this program because the fee to monitor them is paid by the person. And if they have no money available, then they can't pay the fee, so they end up going to jail. The monitoring fee is $10 a day. So obviously, I would rather have someone that is a non-violent offender in their home at $10 a day than in the county jail at $25 a day. So I'm saving money there in my budget. I'm saving jail space. And there is a good likelihood that in many of these situations, the person, if he or she is unemployed, can work with our fine work-off program, Saturday work program, if you will call it that. And they can, in fact, be picked up at their home, work all day, and pay off credit for money toward the fine that they owe. So it's a number of positive things that conceivably could come from this. And I would recommend that we do this. We've researched it with Prosecutor Roy Carpenter and Judge Ishii and the two companies that provide this service, and we believe that we can do this to everyone's benefit. And of course, this will be for a trial period. And if it does not work out, then we would not continue it. But I don't see a downside to it at this point.
Chief, what is the responsibility of these companies as far as monitoring and keeping checks? Will you tell us about that?
Right. They maintain, just like a Department of Corrections probation officer, control over that individual as far as where he is and if he leaves the house or not. They have the ankle devices like the state does that they monitor on some of the individuals. Some they do not. They just keep a close watch on them through their personnel. In effect, they have private probation officers of what these are. And they have been in existence, and we've utilized them through the court system with some degree of success for the last several years. So this is not a new or pilot program. This is just something that ordinarily the individual violator would pay for himself. But this also encompasses indigents where we can be getting some utilization from them as well. And that's pretty much how it works. It's a private probation and parole situation.
So we're currently using this program on non-indigent prisoners.
Correct.
In certain circumstances. And it's worked out well for us in those cases for people who had ability to pay for non-indigent prisoners that we're allowing to use this program.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And this is simply asking for us, rather than to pay the money to the county jail, $25 a day, $10 a day, to the same company that's already monitoring those with the ability to pay. Correct? I understand.
Just a process question.
Yes.
Who makes that initial determination that this person would be a house arrest candidate, and then who makes the final determination that they're, nonviolent and all that?
It would be a collaborative effort, mostly between the judge and the senior bailiff officer that's a ranking officer in court that day. Obviously, some people would not be eligible for it. For instance, if it was a drug offense, or if it was someone that had a prior history of violence, even though it may not be for that crime. There are certain categories that we utilize where we don't let people qualify for number one, the work program, or certainly number two, house arrest. It's a judgment call that's made by the court. But we usually err on the side of caution. However, there are some situations where you have people that are sentenced to 60 days in jail, and it may be for second offense shoplifting or something like that, and they are not a continuing threat or even a threat to society. So hopefully we'll be able to utilize people such as that, but we don't intend to put anyone back in the community that would be a threat to the citizens.
The agency, have you got any kind of program for an agency, like a Saturday work program, anything like that?
Yes, sir, that is in fact what we're talking about here. Instead of the people going to jail, they would serve their jail time at home And then if they're eligible for the work program, they would be required to be picked up at 8 and work all day till 5, and they would be developing cash credit toward paying off their fine. That's how I hope it will work.
Just to follow up, so ultimately it's the judge as part of his ruling that makes the decision that.
Right. The judge is, of course, going to make the ruling as to whether someone should serve time in jail depending on the nature of the offense. And we feel like there are certain offenses where people are sentenced to time that this is a viable option. And we would like to have the opportunity to try it.
I so move we accept the request that the chief has proposed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, your second request.
Yes, sir. My second request is request authorization to allow Officer Aaron Bennett, who's our newly appointed training officer, to attend an out-of-state specialty munitions instructor class in Coleman, Alabama. This is the closest location we can get that taught this particular expertise.
Do we have a motion?
I make a motion we accept his request.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes. All those opposed?
Thank you.
Public service? We'll take a break after this, but get into executive session.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. You should have at your tables this bid tabulation of the late. Now, we opened bids today, this afternoon at 3 o'clock for contractor services to bore under Highway 12 and Kansas City Railroad in West Starkville, install a 20-inch casing. We had 2 bidders. The lowest and best bidder was Infill Construction out of Jackson, Mississippi. And we asked that they quote unit pricing so that we have some flexibility. The minimum amount of bore is going to be 220 feet, but depending on circumstances, locations of underground utilities, or you may not be able to bore perfectly perpendicular, you could have to put in additional casing sections which are 20 feet. So we asked them to bid in increments of 20 feet up to 300 feet. Their bid price for 220 feet is $50,820. If we put in 240 feet, it's $55,200. If they have to put in 260 feet, it's $59,540. If we have to put in 280 feet, it's $63,840. And if we need to put in 300 feet, the price is $68,100. So, with that said, I would request your approval of this request to accept the bid from Hemphill Construction at these prices. We need to go ahead and do this to get our fire loop in on time to service the Lakeside Place development that's about to finish up on Old Highway 12.
Do we have a motion?
Move approval of the lowest and best bid from Pinville Construction Company for boring and casing installation services on Highway 12 and Kentucky, Kansas City Southern Railway, not to exceed $68,100 for a 300-foot boring section.
Do we have a second? Second. Motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes. Thank you. That brings us down to executive session. And we need to have a motion to go into break.
I move to take a 5-minute recess. Or 10 minutes.
We're going to take a 5-minute break here. One right here.